talk this.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your just researching this episode has made me want to start another run host, Madeline.
I'm your not me host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to the first episode of 2024.
Woo!
It's my side quest as Emma determined to spare us from 8 weeks of gaming at the end of the cycle.
That would have been a long episode, Madeline.
Would have been a very... Look, those episodes are going to be 2 hours this year.
I know.
It's to subject Emma to that. No, this year, you know, we're at the start of a new run here, 2024. New year, new you. So we're going to be talking about roguelikes.
You're right. We died on December 31st at midnight. And in fact, were respawned immediately afterwards, if you didn't know how the new year worked.
That's the ritual of the ball dropping.
Yes, yeah. It's to distract you from the loading.
Yeah. It's really a loading, the 10, 9, 8, the countdown, a loading screen.
Yes, yeah.
And now we're all turn-based. ASC, is it ASCII? ASC2? This is not a word I've ever heard.
Said aloud. I also don't know.
With those graphics, we all are very rigidly defined by definitions that Emma and I have learned about.
Yeah.
Over the past few days. But yeah, I was inspired, you know, as is their wont, roguelikes, having a moment, as always.
Having another moment.
I feel like roguelikes have a moment.
A few moments in a row.
Yeah. You know, we were watching Dad play Hades over the break, and
you're playing FTL. Yeah.
I'm tempted to restart Binding of Isaac, just reading about it. The itch in my fingers. So, you know, I wanted to talk about, like, what is a roguelike? What even is rogue? What's the history of the genre, the evolution of the genre, what makes it a roguelike or a roguelite or sort of roguey, and, you know, what makes you want to do that with just one more run, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, as a very early, you know, forum discussion on the idea of a roguelike said, the key element of these games is that you can look at them and say, doesn't that remind you of Rogue? Which is how it was written out.
And, well, that's a really lovely sentiment. Something that I was thinking about a lot in preparing for this episode is, so gaming has a lot of, like, nonsense genre descriptors,
yes.
Right? In a way that, you know, we don't call anything a Citizen Kane-y, you know, or that sort of thing, right?
We could,
and I think we ought to consider it.
You know what? There are ones that are like it's like Rashomon.
Yeah,
I feel like is one movie that does get used like it's a Rashomon like.
Sure. You know what I mean? And like some directors, I guess.
Yeah.
M. Night Shyamalan. Yeah, it feels like he is the, like, sort of the best analogy to, like, a Metroidvania, you know.
How do you say his name? You said Shamalama and it is excised the actual pronunciation from my
Shyamalan?
Shyamalan? Okay, let's move on we're sorry, Mr. M. Night.
Mr. M.
Mr. M, we apologize.
I wasn't prepared for that. I was just like, anyway, all this to say, gaming has a lot of silly genres, and of course we talked about what is an indie game a few side quests ago. But when thinking about, like, the ones that come to mind of this type are roguelike, Metroidvania, Souls-like. There are more, no doubt, but those are big ones that come to mind as these, like, named after another game.
Yeah.
Genre. And well, I could, like, call to mind what Metroid and Castlevania and Dark Souls look like.
Right.
Rogue was not a game that I could have told you really anything about other than guesses based on what I know a roguelike is.
Yeah,
in the year 2024. Which I think will become fascinating as we continue to dig into what is a roguelike, given that how many people who have played a roguelike in the past 3 years have any familiarity with this original game.
Yeah.
And that's not to say, like, everyone has played Metroid or anything like that, but I would bet that the percentage is much lower.
Yeah.
Anyway, Rogue is a 1980, I think. We have so many notes for this week. A 1980 game that was made by a couple of, like, California programmers, UC Santa Cruz students, right? And they made it because they really liked Colossal Cave Adventure. They really liked the, like, earliest D&D video game, and they wanted to make a game that would be fun for them to play. But they realized the issue of that in the year 1980 was that Colossal Cave Adventure, if you're familiar with it or have heard us talk about it on the show before, and many of the great games of the time were just text-based adventures. And here's the problem. If you're the designer of a text-based adventure, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
You
know the route.
So they realized that, like, that would not achieve what they were hoping to achieve, which was to make a game that would be fun for themselves to play. And so the only way to do that is they had to make something that would be different every time. And they also like D&D, so they were like, who would go running off into a dungeon by themselves? A rogue. And so Rogue was created. I did try to play Rogue, not that, it's not the week where I have to play the game, right?
No.
But I did try to play Rogue on, one of the browser emulator things, but it didn't have a controls guide, and so I kept, like, pressing buttons, and it's like, throw an item. It's like, press escape to exit, but escape just took me out of full screen, so I couldn't figure out, I, like, kept having to, like, throw my axe, and then go pick it up again, because I couldn't figure out, and then I got to what seemed to be, like, a go down to the next level thing, and I couldn't figure out what button would allow me to go down to the next level. So, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, that's the risk you take with old games. Actual old games.
Yeah.
It, in fact, does not give you a tutorial anymore.
If I had just had someone in the comments be like, these are the buttons you have to press, that would have been mostly fine. But yeah, Rogue is turn-based, sort of. In many ways, my friend, it plays a little bit like the turn-based open world of my suggestion.
Yeah.
Infamously, several weeks ago.
You're right. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's not an open world.
No, it's not.
You're in a dungeon.
Yeah.
There is a fixed amount of space you can traverse.
Yes. I'm just saying. I felt ever so mildly vindicated that there was a not at all like what I suggested, but just enough like it that you could recognize it version of it. And isn't that the spirit of the roguelike anyway? To take something and turn it into something completely different with some vague similarity to the original idea.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, very bare bones. You just sort of, like, walk around. Every once in a while you run into a enemy that's denoted by a letter. So, like, I fought, like, a bat that was a B and a hobgoblin that was an H. And you just fight it by, like, stepping on it. And the game tells you if you hit it or not.
Good.
So, did not give Binding of Isaac vibes. No danger of me getting too into Rogue, I would say. But it did spawn gaming's perhaps most controversial genre.
Yes.
That's not true.
I did see on a couple of articles that you can point to a game that came out like the year before called Beneath Apple Manor that was basically doing this. It's just Rogue's the one of them that caught on, right? But I think Beneath Apple Manor, like, would be a better genre label, to be honest. I think BAM-like? Yeah. I think that's what we should return to, I think.
A rogue BAM.
Yes, a rogue BAM. That's what we want.
I think it's better.
Yeah.
Anyway, so over the years, Rogue, I feel like to me, in looking at some of these very early ones, the one where you start to see the most, to me anyway, like, here's what this will eventually be, is NetHack, which is sort of a true roguelike that comes out in 1987 where there are like some items and you can have some run-based blessings and curses, right? And so maybe we should be calling it, net hackies, because I think, we continue to step further and further away from the Rogue Lord's light here.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the roguelike has evolved considerably over the past almost 45 years since the original came out, with a lot of, I feel like, touch points along the way, but sort of exploded into more popular conscience. Conscience? That's not what I mean. I do feel consciousness. With the release of titles like Spelunky and like Binding of Isaac in that era where it reached sort of a new tier of popularity.
Which is fascinating, having gone through all of this historical research on the roguelike term, because in a lot of ways those games are not actually like traditional roguelikes.
Emma, break that down for us, because it's fascinating.
You could find a lot of great blog articles. I don't think we'll go too far into like the Usenet one, but there was an article on Slashy's journal from Santiago Zapata, where he went through there was a whole on Usenet, which is prior to internet forums. They were trying to make a discussion topic for a category of games. They're originally calling dungeon games.
Yeah, they tried to make them dungeon, and then people were like, that's bad.
So they're like, they're not all in dungeons. There are games that are in dungeons that aren't like these games. And somebody suggested roguelikes, and there was a heated discussion and debate on the matter, which is extremely funny.
Already in the early 90s referred to as the granddaddy of these games.
Right,
notably.
Yes. But that wasn't actually based around a lot of the common points of roguelikes either. It was mostly it's not a text adventure. It's using art of some sort. Seemed to be the main distinguishing factor.
Yeah, that was super wild to me, that they made this genre thing that when you look at why they made it has nothing to do with what we now define as the genre.
Right.
I do want to call out one of these message board things that you excerpted in our notes of somebody saying, I don't like the idea of having this group of games named after a single one of them.
Yeah. This
guy had a rough few decades coming up in the gaming industry.
Yeah, they really did. I like the one that's also roguelike. That has got to be the worst hierarchy name I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Incredibly funny.
Yeah.
But then the most common thing that came up in the what is a roguelike thing is the Berlin interpretation.
So funny.
That is such a funny thing to call a definition of a game genre. But it was at the first International Roguelike Development Conference in 2008 in Berlin, you may assume.
Yeah, I surmise.
Where they all these roguelike fans and experts or whatever came together.
Rogues.
And all these rogues, all these roguelikers, you might say, came together and tried to create a definition of roguelike with high level priorities and low level priorities, and you could score a game based on how many of these different things they had. And then Spelunky came out months later and wasn't those things, which is incredibly funny to me. Let's see, I wrote down those specific things somewhere. Oh yeah, so high value stuff. Permadeath, which obviously you see some form of in modern roguelikes as well. Random generation, which again. Turn-based.
Those two hold. The rest of this gets weird.
Yes. Turn-based, which I don't really fully understand what they mean by turn-based. Perhaps you, having tried Rogue, can explain this better.
Rogue has turns. You move, the enemy moves.
Okay. Next one is that it's non-modal, so you do not like go into different modes. Like in an RPG, right? You might enter battle mode. That's not something that happens in a roguelike. It's just all of your actions are available at any time. It's grid based, so think Fire Emblem, I guess. There's a grid, and monsters and the players take up a tile and that sort of stuff.
A Three Houses roguelike would go crazy.
You know, that you could I think you could argue on some things that Fire Emblem does have some roguelike elements to it.
That's true. If you play Fire Emblem like everyone plays Fire Emblem, there is a light roguelike element.
There is, yes.
Ironically, in avoiding permadeath.
Right, yeah. Like, complexity. So you can have several solutions, and there's different interactions. Resource management. So there's a limited amount of resources that you can use. Hack and slash, which is why turn-based was confusing me, but maybe it's the way they're using hack and slash that's confusing to me. But you kill a lot of monsters. Player versus world, you don't enter diplomacy with the monsters, essentially.
Yeah.
And then exploration and discovery. So you explore the map and discover items, and you have to do this anew every time you start a new game. So those are the high value factors. Low value factors, one player character, right? So you have your character, it's player centric, it's just this one character, and when that character dies, it's the end of the game. Monster behavior is similar to players, so they're not like puzzle bosses, I guess. Any role that applies to a player also applies to monsters. They can use items and cast spells and whatever. There's tactical challenge. So you learn about the game and then you gain mastery as you go, essentially. Dungeons. I was going to save that one for last.
Oh, sorry.
Dungeons. It's in a dungeon of some sort. There's levels composed of rooms and corridors, is what they specifically said. Numbers. You deliberately show, you see your hit points, your stats, whatever. Those information's not hidden from you. And also, the weirdest one is the traditional display for roguelikes is to represent the tiled world by ASCII characters. ASCII. Which essentially means, like, they're making art out of, like, your keyboard letters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, as we all know, having played Spelunky, is required.
Yeah. And yeah, because, you know, they laid this all out, and then Spelunky came out, and there's not a lot.
Spelunky, if you're not familiar...
Spelunky does not hold on to a lot of that.
If you're not familiar with Spelunky or haven't listened to our episode on Spelunky 2 from a few years ago, in Spelunky you are a cave spelunker. It is very much real time. You jump around and try to get further into the cave.
Yes.
So it, you know, is a cave a dungeon? It might have dungeon element.
You don't fight in Spelunky either. Right? Because it's a platformer. It's not...
Well, it's not
really
primarily
combat.
like you must kill everything, but you can kill things.
But I feel like a lot of Spelunky is in fact avoiding things.
That is
not,
true.
Destroying things.
Yes. So, one, I think that more genres should have these kind of absolutely immediately out of date genre summons. If we could get one of these things together on indie, that would be awesome. If Jeff could convene this for the definition of indie, that'd be sick.
Yeah. That would be good.
So I think that should happen. But yeah, two, it's fascinating how much of just like the high value stuff that they look at here. Like, you see some of it, and of course permadeath and random generation. Honestly, those to me feel like the two things that anyone has latched onto that mean anything when you use the phrase roguelike anymore. Yeah. I think that is really what it pins to these days.
I mean, the Berlin the Berlin interpretation definitely feels like more of a curiosity in some cases. I read like a blog post from Darren Gray on his personal blog called "Screw the Berlin Interpretation," which was essentially like an argument against like trying to define a genre by like a list of yes or no features, like limits what that genre can do because they are afraid of being like cast out of the genre, right? Which I don't think really happened to roguelikes, but I did think it was an interesting conversation.
It's an interesting conversation, although the framing of it in the fear zone, I think, is sort of funny to me. It's like, what am I afraid of? Oh no, people liked my game, but it's not a real roguelike. I've been cast out. I see what he's getting at. I just think I thought it was a funny...
I might have added the fear idea, but like just essentially like it's like trying to force people to stick to pedantic rules.
So, should it even be called a roguelike anymore?
I mean, what else are you going to call it?
I don't know. Try again game.
A try again game? That's great. Yeah.
One more time game.
It is an interesting one because it is like one of those genres, like, you know, Metroidvania. I almost just said Castlevania. The Castlevania genre. Where if you said it to someone who just doesn't have familiarity with games, they'd be like, what? But, you know, there's some... If you said film noir to someone who didn't have any experience with movies, they would also be like, what?
No, here's the thing, though. I actually think roguelike and film noir, I mean, they have nothing to do with each other. Please don't take this as an actual comparison. But at least the words suggest something. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Like, Castlevania... I'm now saying Castlevania. Metroidvania and Souls-like don't suggest anything. Like, those are meaningless words. Whereas at least the phrase, like, rogue, given that they did name this after the, like, D&D character, the, like, you're a thief running around kind of idea, right? Not that you would ever hear roguelike and be like, yes, I 100% understand exactly what that is. But you might have some ideas about what it's not.
Sure.
Maybe. In the same way as film noir, you might not be like, it's a voiceover of a hard-boiled detective smoking his cigarette. You might be like, well, it's not a kid's movie. As opposed to, like, Metroidvania. That's a nonsense collection of syllables.
That's fair.
So I give it a half a step up.
From that?
Yeah.
In the modern definition, though, it really has mostly come to mean you start from the beginning of, like, a sequence of maps, a sequence of rooms every time you die. And there's some random generation to it.
Yeah, runs based and random. Otherwise it'd be like, well, is Super Mario a roguelike? Like, almost, right?
No, definitely a key part of it that has held up among the genre is that there is some element of randomness, that you can run into different things on each run as opposed to just learning a platform level and doing it.
Yeah, I did facetiously in our notes ask if visual novels where you're like trying to get the good ending are a kind of roguelike, but I guess because they're not random, they might not apply.
Yeah, I think that sort of disqualifies them. If you had, like, I mean, you could possibly make something with an element of randomness to it, right?
Yeah.
Not as much as, like the Hades' rooms or Spelunky's platforming levels. But if you theoretically had like characters that could show up, like have like a chance, to show up in the middle of a new scene, you could do something there and have like a couple different scene variations. But that would be like a lot of work.
This is a free idea for someone though.
That would be a lot of writing.
Whatever, man. How much writing is there in Hades? It's just taking what Hades did and like no more dungeon.
You're right. It kind of is, yeah.
So just saying, it's an idea. The hottest thing in gaming is like roguelike plus 2 other genres.
Yeah, it is.
So this one is ripe for the picking.
It's right there.
Is Civilization a roguelike? Gotcha there.
I mean, maybe onto something there.
That's a blog. But something I think is it's interesting to me that this is a genre that whenever it gets brought up in the context of these like, genre bender ones, still warrants a sentence that's like, is it a real roguelike? I don't know, right? Which is especially bizarre to me when it's being compared to a game that no one has played or knows anything about. And that's too dismissive of the original Rogue, but, roll with me here.
I mean, I remember around the time Hades came out, people tried to start using this, like, roguelite term. I'm sure we used it on the podcast a few times.
I'm sure we have.
Which is essentially like, it's got some elements of a roguelike, but it's got more of like a meta progression, right? The thing with Hades is every time you reset, you can improve Zagreus's abilities, whether by unlocking other weapons or getting new keepsakes or investing in certain abilities that he can get or whatever. You can, in fact, improve your ability to do well on a run, which isn't part of like the pure roguelike experience. So I think there was a lot of people who were thinking like roguelite, she suggests the roguelike, but with a little less friction, I guess.
But here's why
but I feel like that has actually dropped out of the parlance since it was introduced.
Well, it's silly, right? Because who is making a game that is a genuine roguelike anymore? Right? Not that it has to hit every single box of the Berlin thing, right? But none of the games that I have like in my notes or anywhere here check enough of these boxes that I feel like you'd be like, that's a roguelike, not a roguelite. I hope I'm
I feel like
enough.
the main distinction point that was used was the idea of whether there was like how much meta progression you can have in between runs.
Yeah.
How much can you improve your character beyond just your own skills, right?
Which is interesting in itself, right? The original, and then this is why it's so controversial, the genre, right? Of like, it's really built around literal get good.
Yeah.
Right? And now, interestingly, I would even say, even like Binding of Isaac has like a little bit of this, I think. Because when you unlock more items in that game, you have way more tools at your disposal. Like that the genre only attains popularity as it waters itself down. Did I say that, waters down neutrally?
Yeah. It did make me think a little bit more about like Souls-like fans, right? And like the debate among people of like, should Souls-like games have an easy mode of sorts?
Yeah.
Right? And I do wonder, like, all these people who wrote the Berlin interpretation or whatever, when all of these roguelikes were coming out that had like, you can upgrade your character and whatever, if they felt similarly, but the pure roguelike just hadn't caught on in the same way that like the pure Souls-like had. And if that, like, it's just like, I'm the purist, but of course as you open up the ability to to get your foot in the door, that does open up appeal, right?
Well, and roguelikes and Souls-likes, I think, in many ways are grappling with the same friction point, right? Which is, high difficulty, but also the sort of battle against the inherent frustration of death as a fail state, right? And both Souls-like games and roguelikes, whatever, but, especially the purists of roguelikes have to grapple with, we have to have something that's fun enough or engaging enough or hooky enough about this game that the player overcomes the, decades and decades and decades of every other game telling you, like, dying is bad. Yeah. And, like, dying still has to be bad.
Yeah.
But it's a tricky balance. And it's a balance that, like, I say this myself, God, I can't play Spelunky. I can't do it. I don't like it. I'm bad at it, and I won't get better at it. And so it's interesting to me. But then again, like, Binding of Isaac, well, I don't know. I think with Spelunky, it's that I don't feel that I make any progress ever. And with Binding of Isaac, and even with FTL, I at least get to feel like, oh, I've unlocked a new ship. I've unlocked a new item. Like, this run wasn't just a total waste of my wild and precious life. Whereas with Spelunky, I'm like, I died.
Yeah.
And that's probably a psychological flaw, but still, is the ultimate battle of the design of these games. Tricky stuff, dude.
Maybe you should get into the Mystery Dungeon series.
I remember we had Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, and I don't remember liking it that much.
Well, one article I found was like, oh, here's baby's first roguelike. You won't be challenged at all. It's like, yeah, it's a game for children.
I am a baby.
I am a baby.
But yeah, do we feel like, well, is there even a point in distinguishing between the difference between the meta progression games and not?
For someone considering a purchasing decision, yeah, probably.
Fair enough. But in terms of what we're expecting the genre label to do, I don't expect action-adventure to tell me, is it guns or is it swords?
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, that's something I need to know before I purchase it.
Yeah. But there are so many other, like, weird little, ooh, that's hard to design, that I kept encountering as reading about this. Like, I read an article on The Verge that was an interview with the composers for Hyper Light Breaker, which is also a roguelite, whatever. And so they talk about a lot, like, hopefully it's a game that someone is playing over and over and over, and also hopefully it's a game where they're playing the beginning of it over and over and over, and the same parts of it over and over. How do you compose music that doesn't just, like, destroy your brain?
Yeah. That is a challenge. I was thinking about it and I was like, that's any long game. But I see the thing of, like, if you're not changing the music that's at the beginning, then yeah, I can see how you would be like, okay, we have to make this in particular, like this part in particular, where people will be dying as they get the handle of it, to be listenable for long periods of time.
Well, and it also needs to be not like a torment to you, a taunt to you, right?
Yeah.
Or a little bit maybe, but like the balance of that, right? It can't be like, oh my god, I've died to this mini boss like 1,000,000 times and I can't listen to this effing song one more time as I die.
Yeah. Probably a similar thing for Souls-like.
Probably.
When you're designing the boss theme for the very hard boss, gotta make sure that it's
better
not
be a banger, but not too much of a banger.
Exactly. Yeah.
I also found it interesting to read about, folks may remember this from our Returnal episode a couple years ago as well, but you don't think of, like, being able to save and quit as something that could be counter to a genre, right?
Yeah.
But here it's a really kind of controversial, I mean less controversial over time, and Returnal did eventually get the option to quit mid-run, but it's a controversial and harder to implement apparently than it seems option for some of these games.
Yeah. I thought the one that was talking about, I can't remember what game it was for, but it was just saying, like, if they were to make a save file at any point, like, but by the way the world generation works, it would just be huge. It would be a huge save file. Which I wonder if that was also the case with something like Returnal, which is making like a procedurally generated roguelike environment with, you know, PS5 graphics.
The game was Stone Shard.
Oh, Stone Shard was the other game? Yeah. That they had it where you had to go back to a tavern, and people were like, if I walk 2 hours out, and then I have to walk 2 hours back to a tavern.
Yeah.
It's not very helpful if I want to save and quit real fast. And these games did eventually get it, but it's just a matter of, like, well, they weren't considering for it in development, and probably by the time they were like, oh, maybe this could be good, it was perhaps relatively complicated to actually feed that back in. Like, Stone Shard's things was like they had to make changes to the way the world was generated in order to implement the save and quit feature so that it would actually work. And I think it was similar with Returnal.
Similar with Binding of Isaac, which did not have it when it was a Flash game because, like, it couldn't.
Yes. Returnal is sort of like a special case because not a lot of roguelike games have runs that are as long as they are in Returnal, which could get up to like 4 hours or something to do a single run. Most of the time it's like an hour tops. So that's why that was a particular problem for that one.
And it wades into the ongoing question of, like, how much can you as a designer curate the experience you want players to have?
Yeah.
I thought the Dead Cells guy was interesting, where he was like, we don't, like, the autosaves are random in Dead Cells, so you can't, like, save scum, but people work around it on their PCs, which, like, we wouldn't have done it that way, but, like, they're happy, whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the sort of, like, fundamental tension sometimes, is how much can you as a designer be like, actually no, like, it is my intention that to play this, you have to be able to sit down and give it your focus for 30 minutes and not, like, find exploits, so save scum and, like, exploit the RNG and all that.
Yeah. The fundamental problem of releasing art into a busy world, essentially.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Marty. I will pause your movie in the middle.
I know. What if Martin Scorsese, like, disabled the pause button on Netflix?
He would. There are directors that would if they could.
They paid him. They, like, spent, like, hundreds of millions of dollars on his most recent, on Killers of the Flower Moon, right? Like, what if even, like, I'll give you $10 million back if there's no pause button. We'd figure out a way around it. We'd figure it out.
Yeah. You can't foil the online generation.
So, what makes one of these good, Emma?
I don't know. You're the one who's really into them. What makes one of these good, Melon? I really only played Hades. I bounced off Dead Cells. I think that's, like, the only other major one I played. Inscription. Does Inscription count as a roguelike?
Inscription comes up as a roguelike deck builder. Fascinating how many mini genres of this there are, by the way.
Yeah, the very first part of Inscription is a roguelike, I guess. Yeah. I think that's maybe it.
You haven't played BPM, Crypt of the Necrodancer, Slay the Spire?
Nope.
Rogue? You played Rogue?
I haven't played Rogue.
Oh my god.
What's wrong with me?
I mean, I think there are some interesting blogs about this. right? I mean, one of them is like the most like basic design element stuff of it is like it's gotta feel mostly fair. It can be a little unfair, but it can't be like wild unfair. So in one of these kind of overviews of rules of roguelike design that I was reading on Game Developer from John Harris, this one got very into the weeds of like items in ways that I don't think apply to all games. But I did feel like some of his rules at the beginning were helpful, which was like, you can't have instant death monsters that you can't predict, or instant death items that you have to drink them to figure out what they are, right? Because then the player will never want to advance, and the player will never want to try an item. I do feel like the kind of like items that you don't know what they are until you try them is something that has faded somewhat from like popular this. Right. There might be items that you don't know what they are until you try them the first time. But then usually you have a record of them moving forward. Yeah. As opposed to Rogue, where I picked up a green potion, and it was just a green potion until I got something that could identify it.
I love my green potion. Was it a Balogen trail?
Nothing like green potion.
Yeah.
But the end, he was also like, no item should be useless. I was like, good, helpful. But like, you know, items being double-edged swords that are helpful in some scenarios and harmful in others. It's like, okay, there's lots of like good little, like, if you're designing how your systems work here, good little nuggets, right? But I also liked, I think this is Patrick Klepek on, you know, former Waypoint, talking about, you know, what, like, he's a big Spelunky fan, apparently, and, like, why he likes that one a lot and didn't like some of the other ones that came out around the same time as much, is that idea that, like, you always feel like you could do it.
Right.
Right? It's bad if you end up in a situation where it's like, there's no way. Or, like, you can feel that, but, like, you have to still want to keep playing.
Right.
Right? So
you don't want to run into that a lot.
Yeah. Like, you could be like, I'm like, this is hard. But you have to feel like, maybe in the next stream I'll pick up something that'll turn it around. Or, like, if I just play good enough, I can turn it around, right? You want that sense of experimentation and that sense of, like, maybe in the next room I'll find something that'll make it all worth it, right? And I think that, like, thinking about, like, okay, like, sometimes there are Binding of Isaac runs where you're just, like, like, mowing down everybody, and it's good. But sometimes you just have improbable runs where you're like, I'm making it happen, right? This is not a good setup that I've got, but somehow I'm making it happen. And that element of kind of like enough surprise and possibility, I think, is important.
Yeah.
For me, I have to feel like there's some value in my run even when I die sometimes.
Right.
And like, the gameplay loop of Spelunky is just not enough for me for that, but I don't need a ton of progression. I just need a little progression. I don't know. I'm trying to think like what else makes it good. You just have to want to play again.
Yeah.
I'm not really a big believer in like replay value, you know, mostly, but here gotta be replay value.
Yeah. I did play some of Returnal because I got it with my PlayStation 5 bundle.
Oh, right.
I also bounced off that. I gave it to you. I think you might have it.
Have not played it.
Yeah. I feel like for me, runs have to be relatively short. I think if Returnal's runs weren't like 4 hours long, perhaps I would have stuck with it a little bit longer. But there is like, I think you can get to a point where you're like, I sunk a lot of time into that, right? And then I fricked it up.
Well, I think that comes back to some of the things I was saying, right? So you have to want to start again. I think the longer the run gets, the higher that burden is of like, oh my god, I have to do the beginning again.
Yeah.
And that for me is always the hurdle that these have to clear for me. I can't have too much of the feeling of, oh my god, I have to do the beginning again. You can have a little of it. You have enough pain that you like care when you die.
Right.
Right. But you can't have the feeling of like dying with one hit left on a boss in a non-Souls type game, right? Of like, oh my god, I have to go through those 4 phases again.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And you also, like you were saying, like that, I've sunk a lot of time into this. I haven't played Returnal, so I don't know if it has the right balance of you always feel like you could make it. But the longer it is, the more, you know, you're in trouble if you end up in a situation 2 hours in where you're like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
I promised Click My Boyfriend I would mention Dungeons of Dreadmore, one of his favorite games of all time.
I pulled out Dungeons of Dreadmore quotes on purpose.
I figured you did.
Just for his request.
Yeah.
As we've been talking about, from David Baumgart, who's the art director, on an archived post on GameSpy, was saying, like, we just really wanted to make this accessible, because traditional ones are very unfriendly. And so Dreadmore's way of being accessible in a lot of ways was a really friendly sort of style to it.
Isn't it funny that a hallmark of a genre for a long time can be like, it hates you, the player?
People like that, though.
I know.
There's some real freaks, you know?
Some little freaks out there.
There's some little freaks out there that really like it when their game says, get out of here.
Yeah.
And there is something, you know, to games giving you friction at points, right?
Yeah.
Of making something that's more difficult or something that's you're unused to or whatever, or punishing you for a bad decision or whatever. Roguelikes, just the very traditional ones, are just built on that, right?
Yeah. Also interesting that I feel like non-roguelike games are building optional roguelike modes now.
Oh yeah. The free DLC for God of War Ragnarok roguelike.
Yep.
Roguelike mode, sort of roguelike mode, I think, attached to the remastered update for Last of Us Part 2.
Yep.
Someone at Sony was like, you know what's out? Live service. You know what's in?
Roguelike.
Roguelike. Get it now. Apparently the God of War one is really good.
Give it a try.
I still haven't finished the first
one. Do we think, are we in the golden age of the roguelike? Are there highs still to be hit? We must be approaching a wave of true Hades likes soon.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When did Hades come out?
2020. The fall.
20?
Yeah.
I guess it was out before that in early access, so that's probably why it's feeling like, no, wait, was it 2020?
No, it was. We were in our freezing apartment. Click My Boyfriend played like 80 hours of it in like a month.
Yeah, but that makes sense sort of timeline wise, right? It came out and people were like, let's make that, and it'll take like 3-4 years for it to come out. So yeah, we're getting there.
But like, see, when do we switch to calling them Hades likes?
Well, that's just like a sub-genre, right?
I guess almost all
Rogue Hades.
Hermeses, maybe. Or like Pans, right? If we're gonna take like the rogue element.
Right. Okay.
Just to make it even more confusing.
Yeah. I like that. Well, we'll get Hades 2, the first among the Hades likes, dropping in early access this year.
I know, they're gonna scoop all the other Hades likes. It's too bad.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably overdue to get into the deck builder ones.
Yeah. Yeah, you should try. People love Slay the Spire.
I have it. It was like a free game at some point, so I have it.
Yeah.
On the PlayStation. But I'm scared.
You don't want it. You can't do it now. You have to wait.
I would like to see more games like I said, a Fire Emblem Three Houses roguelike would go crazy. Like a Hades like, to be clear.
Yeah. What does that even mean?
Like literally Hades, but swap out the characters with Fire Emblem Three Houses characters.
You're right, that would go hard. That's basically that's sort of what it is, right?
I know it is, except that the battles are like turn-based. I mean, they're turn-based, so it's actually closer to being a roguelike than Hades.
You're right,
really,
but you return to the base camp in between each battle anyway. Right?
No, you could do something with like the divine pulse of it all.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I just feel like that game would sell wild copies because all anyone wants to do is talk to those kids.
Yeah, it's true.
So that would be wild. I would like a Kingdom Hearts one, like a Dragon one. I would buy those 100%.
It's only a matter of time until there's some sort of roguelike mini game.
I know,
a Like a Dragon game.
You go like the sewer coming. Dungeon is sort of.
They chose Animal Crossing this time. Next time, I think it's the roguelike time.
Yeah. Ichiban plays, Hades, and he's like, I've got a new idea for how I should be thinking about my life.
Exactly. Ichiban conquers death through the power of his delusions. He simply doesn't die. He just starts the battle over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, any last roguelike thoughts?
I'm trying to think if there's other genres mashed with roguelikes that I haven't seen too much of yet that I would like to see more of. Right? There's like a bunch of, it's weird, right? Like there's a bunch of like rhythm game roguelikes.
Right.
Yeah. Or like musically based. Bunch of deck builder roguelikes.
Cult of the Lamb is like the Animal Crossing or City Builder. More of a City Builder roguelike.
Yeah. Like. Yeah. With Animal Crossing like aesthetic element.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hades sort of takes visual novel a little bit. Although I still think there's more you could do there. See earlier this episode.
Dating sim is really what it is.
What? Yeah,
dating sim is really what it is.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of like, are there other genres that I wish I could see here? Or other like elements that I wish I could get baked in?
I don't know. That's our discussion prompt.
Yeah, listeners, that is the discussion prompt. Are there other like big genre type things that you wish could be baked into your roguelike? Like, do you wish there was a Metroidvania? Bullet Hell roguelikes exist already. So
yes, that's Returnal. Returnal is definitely a bullet hell.
Yeah, and Binding of Isaac definitely has elements of that for certain bosses as well. And of course, Vampire Survivors, the ultimate bullet hell idle game.
Yeah,
roguelike. But if there are gaming elements that you wish could get filtered into gaming's most popular fake genre, let us know. If you have a roguelike recommendation that you think I will like, and don't say Spelunky. Talking about it, I want to try it again. I'm like, maybe I would be better.
You can't. You cannot get into a roguelike right now, Melon.
Well, Spelunky I would play for an hour and I'd say I'm not better.
Okay,
and
then what if?
Yo, you know what I want? A Trine roguelike.
Sick. A co-op one?
Yeah, you just have to keep... Co-op roguelike actually would be...
The original creators of Dead Cells, I think, are making a co-op roguelike that they announced at the Game Awards.
That would kill us here.
So keep an eye out.
Like, genuinely, that would kill us.
Yeah.
The co-op Hades. Co-op Binding of Isaac. We would forget to eat. Or sleep. Anyway, listeners, if you have thoughts about, like, what defines this? Which of these games should we just rename it after already? Or anything else? Hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat for our main editions, and read our blog, featuring long-running series Click With Boyfriend and Split Screen and other various fun blog content. Should I write a blog about if Civilization is a roguelike?
Yeah.
Maybe. I might start thinking about it, chewing it over. But most importantly, if you enjoy the show, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts. Not Stitcher. I went into total whatever. Anywhere you can find podcasts. You can find Talk This. So subscribe. Don't miss an episode. Next week, it's definitely Pizza Tower. And
Bat and Kaitos. Nice.
Bat and Kaitos. Just kidding.
Baten Kaitos.
So look forward to that, and then in 2 weeks it's Emma's side quest, and we do this whole crazy thing all over again.
All right, look forward to it.
Emma, you do the sign off, but here are your instructions for it. Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
You have to do it as if like you're at like the final boss of the episode here, and you mess up, and you have to like go back to the beginning.
Okay. This week. Oh, no! Wait! No! I'm losing you!
Hello, and welcome to